Hi, it's Barbara Groark of WCFA and Cape May Radio, and we're putting the WCFA spotlight on Thomas Lynskey, a filmmaker who runs HFX Studios, which stands for Historical Films and Experiences. And the specialty is short 10 to 20-minute films on historical subjects, especially what are now little-known events and incidents from history. And you can look him up on his YouTube channel called Part-Time Explorer. Hi, Tom.
Well, hello, Barbara. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And why did you start HFX Studios?
Well, I have always been doing these projects my entire life. HFX Studios itself is sort of just a new thing. It's fairly recent, but my interest in producing documentaries and exploring history has been lifelong, and it's a passion that has really blended in with my full-time job. My job, I work for a company in Los Angeles where we develop software. And ever since joining up with them, a lot of our projects have shifted towards history.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always done this, and frankly, I don't know anything else. I don't know
I,
anything else to do.
I saw something on your website. You started in high school on the Titanic,
Yes.
and then redid it as a mature person who knows more. It's interesting that you've been doing this since high school, and you even have something. You had a lot of views on that.
Yes. Back in high school, pretty much graduation year, that summer after my friend and I, we shot this film in my basement. Well, technically my parents' basement back then, and we built the telegraph room from the Titanic as accurately as we could and as detailed as we could. And we acted out a feature-length film that we wrote about the two telegraph operators and their story of the sinking. And then we flooded it. We flooded the basement with about a foot of water.
Oh, this is realistic. I
It
guess,
was realistic.
were your mom and dad pleased with that?
They did not want to be home for that. They left. It was not a finished basement or anything like that, and it at the time it was kind of flooding a little bit every time it rained. So I just said, "Hey, before you fix that, let's use this."
Pretty good. I looked at 5 films that you have out there. One took place in off Ocean City, off the coast of Ocean City, The Mystery of the Sindia,
Yes.
Sindia. Can you just briefly tell us about that?
Sure. Well, the Cindia was actually, I think, the second video I made for my YouTube channel, which, as you said, is Part-Time Explorer. So it was very rough. It was goofy. I was just kind of having fun. But the Cindia was a sailing ship. She was made of steel, and she was built by Harland and Wolff, which is actually the same company that built the Titanic. I forget the exact year that she was built. I think it was the late 1880s, 1890s, I want to say. Don't quote me on that. And she
Okay.
wrecked in Ocean City. I believe it was 1904. When I made the video, I knew all of this, but it has been 3 or 4 years. But she beached in Ocean City, and no one was hurt, but the ship was a total loss. And there were a lot of questions coming up about, was she smuggling in silver? Because I believe she was owned by the Rockefellers, and at the time silver was coming in, and it was just before New York City, which is where she was sailing to. And a lot of people believed that the Cindia was beached there to avoid the import
So
tariffs.
it sounds like a story from Captain Kidd or something.
A little bit, yes.
Uh,
Yes.
cool. But so the details on that are funny when you get in with the oligarchs of the time may have been
Yes.
doing something a little shady. Interesting.
Sure.
How about the Winslow Junction train wreck, which happened in Winslow Township, New Jersey? Tell us a little about that. It's
Well, that's another story that I've always appreciated. It was a train that was traveling from Camden to Atlantic City in 1922, and the station master, or the tower master, I should say, he accidentally threw the wrong switch. He believed that the high-speed express train coming in bound for Atlantic City was actually a slow-moving train bound for Cape May, and he sent it down the wrong switch, which put it on a tight curve, and it jumped the rails and crashed and killed a handful of people. The 100th anniversary of the disaster was only about a month or so ago, so I wanted to put together a special documentary. There was never really anything covering that in YouTube video form in thorough detail, so I
Right.
wanted to put together the timeline. One of the reasons I make these videos as well is because it helps me to better understand the story. So I never knew the chronology of all the events or where the confusion with the Tower Master came from until I'm like, all right, I have to put together a script. I have to go to the site. I have to see where he stood, and I have to film it and I explain it to an audience. And then that forces me to look farther than I ever have and
Yeah.
understand it better.
Yeah, that was a kind of a sad one because the guy who was responsible thought it later that he thought the idea that he was responsible. But it reminds you, there are train wrecks today that we're trying to find who was really to blame, maybe, and sometimes in cases, maybe there's no one to blame. Now, the story of the Atlantis is another documentary, and that's about the concrete ship off Cape May Point. Now, one thing I liked about this was that you were in the pretty much in the action of this one. You took your kayak out and went right up into the ship that's out there in the water.
Well, the concrete ship is another story I've known my whole life. My parents have been bringing me down to Cape May since I was a baby, and we always looked at that ship, and I always was seeing it deteriorating because more and more chunks of it have been falling into the sea. It's settling deeper into the sand, and I really wanted to capture what was left before it was totally gone. So I kayaked out there, and once again, it was a subject that people have shown on YouTube. It's like, hey, I'm at the concrete ship, but nobody said what the concrete ship was. Where was it built? What was its purpose? Why was it concrete? And I wanted to tell this story, which was a personal tale to me because I'd seen it. I wanted to share it with the world. So I dug into the research. I found photographs of her sisters being built and then kayaked out to it. And it's a beautiful kayaking trip. We set off, my wife was with me, and we set off from Higbee's Beach to the north, came down to it, and got really up close, even kayaked into the wreck. You can kind of go
Yeah,
under the overhanging parts. I don't recommend it if you're not an experienced kayaker, but it was fun.
yeah, it looked like fun, and also the mystery was solved when you mentioned your wife, um, because I there were a couple of shots where we see you from the shoreline. We see you out there, tiny, in the shipwreck or going around the shipwreck. And I thought he's got another cameraman there somewhere, another camera and another camera, because you had your camera on your head or
Yep.
on the kayak itself to go in. So you kind of we explore it right there. You are there, kind of thing. And I'm assuming it was your wife with the camera on the shoreline.
Yes, that's right. And she's always been a huge help. Almost every video I've made since in the last 5 years, she's always been a part of, either as another camera person. We hiked the desert to film a ghost town when she was 4 months pregnant. So
Okay.
she's a real trooper, and then she helped me edit. So a lot of what I do would not be possible without her.
And the baby's fine.
Oh, he's fine. He was actually born 2 weeks ago.
No kidding.
Yeah,
Congratulations. That's
thank you.
wonderful. That's a nice one. But okay, next, exploring the Pine Barrens, the ruins of Fry's Mill, you say, you pronounce it. Fry's
I
Mill.
pronounced it Fries Mill. I believe I was incorrect in it. I've heard a lot of people calling it Freeze Mill since then. Uh,
Hmm.
all my sources were written, so I didn't know. At
The
the time, I didn't have anyone to speak with. But Fry's Mill, one of the reasons I wanted to get out to that was because everything I had seen online, they talk about Fry's Mill from the 1700s, and then they show a concrete, obviously 1900s ruin. And they
hmm
talk about how, oh, this dates back to the 1700s. It was a mill, and then there's all these cabins, but they don't talk about why is everything concrete. So I wanted to go out there and find out what is going on. And Fry's Freeze Mill is a site that dates to the 1700s. And there are stone ruins. There were several chimneys scattered throughout the Pine Barrens out there. Unfortunately, I hear one of those chimneys may have collapsed in the last few months. A couple 100 years old, and it goes down in the last few months. So that's a loss. And then adjacent to the site was a sand company from the 1920s all the way up, I think, till the 1960s or 70s. And that's where all the concrete structures come from. That is also abandoned. We explored that in the video as well, but it is not connected to Freeze Mill, and it is certainly not from the 1700s.
Right.
So we got to see the two sites and draw a definitive line between them.
And that one actually has a little drama within your story because your collaborator, who you had your wife there, I saw her in a few shots working the camera partly, and then you had your friend who was the musician who provided the background guitar on some of it, and he got lost, and you lost him at one point, and we didn't know whether you're going to find it, but it had a happy ending, I'm happy to say.
Yes, I asked him to just go and scout ahead, and he went too far.
What's his name?
Matthew Leonetti. He's a
Okay.
friend of mine, and he's been in a few videos now.
Okay. But he doesn't, you use lots of different musics, not just his.
Yeah, I actually have been licensing my music from a third party lately.
Okay.
But he brought his guitar along. I just thought it would be atmospheric to have that be the music.
It was effective. And then the Centralia story, the ghost town, one of the ghost town stories about the town in Pennsylvania with the underground fire from the, what are they called? The Wildcat coal mines, whatever. And it's been burning and will burn for another how many years?
Up to 250, perhaps. Unbelievable. Centralia, that was my most recent video up until yesterday when I put out a new one. But Centralia is a town in pretty much central Pennsylvania. And it dates back to the 1800s when they built the road between Sunbury and Reading. The Reading Road is what it was called. And then the tavern popped up, and then a town formed around it. And then, as you said, in the 1960s, they decided to move the landfill to an old pit mine where they dug out, pretty much quarried out all this coal, and they started dumping the trash in there. And they thought they had the coal veins sealed up, but they didn't do that good of a job. They burned the waste in there to consolidate it, and it ignites an exposed vein of coal. And a couple decades go by and they realize this is out of control. We didn't put it out, and now we have to evacuate the town. And there are still residents. It's not a full ghost town just yet, but there are 5 residents still who cannot leave their homes to their family. When they pass away, the town will fully be abandoned. And I did a documentary on that, exploring it and telling the history, and that's also on my channel.
I actually drove through Centralia one time, almost inadvertently, but I just was wandering because my grandfather was from Mahanoy City, which is sort of in driving distance of Centralia. His family was from there, and I hit Centralia, and there were signs. It was very foggy, and it says fog area. That was like a traffic sign that says fog area, and it's just foggy, and it's not fog from the sky. It's smoke coming up from the bottom. Pretty eerie.
It is very eerie. I actually have one more about New Jersey, which got the most views on my channel. It was called The Wreck of the Fremont, the Forgotten Wreck of the Fremont, which is a still visible wreck on the beach by East Point Lighthouse.
Where's East Point Lighthouse?
It's near Millville, Port Norris, that area.
On the bay side, on the riverside. Oh, okay.
Yeah. Photographs of it have gone viral, but everybody just calls it like the ghost ship of New Jersey. So I wanted to find out, what is this ship? I talked to the son of the guy who actually owned it. He wanted to turn it into a cafe back in the 1960s. The ship dates to the 1920s. So it's not truly a wreck. It just kind of got stuck there and deteriorated. We explore the remains of it and tell the history, show some old photographs. And I believe it has something like 150,000 views.
People are interested. And you also go across the country for some stories, like Nevada, Montana, also New York. You're pretty wide ranging. It's kind of fun. I've been reading Moby Dick, and I was interested in the fact, like the Wyoming. The 6-masted, they were still making wooden 6-masted sailing ships. What do they call it? A schooner, or I don't know what kind of category it's in. But they were still doing that in 1906 or something, whatever it was. I had the idea that they stopped making them earlier than that, but they were still making them for economic reasons, I guess. It was still probably cheaper.
Yeah, the Wyoming was the biggest known ship made of wood in
Hmm.
history. I mean, people debate that some ancient ships were bigger, but the Wyoming was incredibly long. I believe she was about 450 feet long, and she was made of wood. She was basically a floating forest, something like 12,000 square feet of sail, and she was made to carry coal out to resupply points, specifically in the Pacific, so that steamships crossing the Pacific would be able to stop and refuel. So her holds were just filled with coal. One day she was weathering a storm off of Nantucket, and it was a terrible storm that nearly sank the lightship she was next to. But she buckled and sank with all hands. A good friend of mine is from the state of Wyoming, and I decided to reach out to him just for fun. And I'm like, "Hey, I'm making this video about a ship named after your state." And he's like, "Oh, is it the Wyoming?" Well, obviously, but he knew he didn't just know the name; he knew the ship. He tells me my great grandfather was the financier of that ship, and my grandmother was the one who christened it. So, I mean, what a small world. He to have that
Exactly.
he started sending me private family stories and references that I was able to incorporate into the video. It was just pretty special to be able to share personal family stories of a friend in the documentary.
Nice.
Yep.
Yeah. And I just want to point out that not everything is about a shipwreck or train wreck. We have the Ningpo was a former pirate ship from China,
Yep.
but then it ended up as a restaurant in San Francisco. Am I getting that right?
Catalina Island off of Los Angeles in the 1920s. She was a Chinese restaurant and then became a floating museum still on the island. But she deteriorated in the 1930s, and apparently they burned her for
Okay.
a Hollywood film in the 30s.
It was useful to the end, I guess.
Yeah,
So,
she went out in a blaze. Yeah, in a blaze of glory.
well, it's really great talking with you, and I hope everybody goes out to your website, the YouTube channel called
Part-time explorer.
Part-Time Explorer, and the historicalfx.com to find out more about you and what you do and what does keep you going
Well,
besides having a 2-week-old son.
you mean keep going with my projects? With my projects, honestly, at this point, it's exhausting to make these, and frankly, it's quite expensive to make these videos. I always try to travel to the site I'm talking about.
Right?
I mean, with the Wyoming, I went up to Bath, Maine, where she was built, and with the Ningpo, I went out to Catalina Island. But at this point, what keeps me going is the viewers. I probably would have lost steam long
Hmm.
ago if I didn't have so many people watching my stuff. My channel has almost 150,000 subscribers, and I get about 4 million views a month. And it's the feedback of people saying, "Hey, I love your work," and seeing so many people being inspired to learn about history or get out there and explore from my videos. That's what keeps me going.
Yeah, that's great. You're associated with several professional and historical societies, for example, the Titanic Society of Atlantic Canada, the Ocean Liner Design and Illustration, and something called Western Places. You consult with people who know what they're talking about.
I don't consider myself to be an historian. I,
Hmm.
I feel that my talent lies more in the production and the crafting of the
Hmm.
fact to something that's coherent and helps
Right.
the audience understand all the details. I
Yeah.
picked up a lot over the years, but I always prefer to talk to the real historians, the people who know what they're talking about, who have studied this far longer than I have. And
Hmm.
I like bringing them in so that they feel this is their work too, like a team effort.
All right. Tom, it's been a pleasure talking with you, and good luck with your next project, plural.
Yes. Thank you very much, Barbara.